Good morning, gorgeous ones. It's Friday morning and it's the end of the first week of spring, and we have had such beautiful weather since spring started. Today is overcast, but every other day this week we've had beautiful warm sunshine, so it's been a nice start. A week without rain, I can hardly believe it. Well, today I want to talk about quite an emotive topic. It's voluntary childlessness. It's an emotive topic for a lot of people, and as a voluntarily childless woman myself, I know how complex that decision can sometimes be. It's not usually one that's made lightly. And I do think, speaking from my own experience, that my decision not to have children was a lot more considered than the decision made by some of the women I knew back in the childbearing day to go ahead and have them. Many of them did that without much preamble at all. And here's the thing, nobody asked them why they wanted to have kids. Nobody stood over them demanding to know the reasons why they chose to procreate. Nobody patronized them by telling them that they'd probably get over it, or that they probably just weren't thinking straight, or they'd eventually change their minds. Nobody says those things, do they, in response to a grown woman who might say she's pregnant or trying to get that way. But if only the reverse were true. Sadly, it isn't. It's almost as if the women who choose to be childless are in some way offensive or selfish or dysfunctional in some other way that people struggle to understand and somehow feel entitled to demand an explanation for. I spent years of my life being called upon to justify myself to a staggering number of people, actually, until the penny dropped that it was none of their damn business. And if they had anything to say about it, they should take it somewhere else. It took me a while to get there, but I actually started telling people it was none of their business, and then a fair few actively chose to be offended by me pointing out the obvious. I had no control over the reactions, of course, and I had to leave them to it, their own ferocious need to figure it out. I should have been flattered, I suppose, that my decisions made such an impact on them, but it was annoying, it was frustrating, and it was sad. Everybody needs the why, don't they? It's part of the human condition to want to understand the reasons for something. No matter what it is, people want an explanation. It helps them to live with themselves. In most situations, if they can't get an explanation they're comfortable with, they'll create one for themselves that enables them to live more comfortably. That's how terrible rumours get started about people. Wars have been started off the back of someone making an inappropriate assumption simply because they were more concerned than they should have been about what was going on in someone else's backyard. My decision to opt out of having kids was an incredibly complex one, and even if I wanted to explain it to someone, it would take forever, and it would involve talking about other things that are nobody's business either. It should have been enough that I made a choice that felt right for my life, and yet for far too many people, it wasn't. A friend I had 20 odd years ago who trapped her poor husband into having 2 kids when he'd started off by saying he didn't want any, then turned around and told me she wished she could trade places with me. What do you say to that, especially as she gave me such a hard time earlier about not wanting to have babies? She said she loved her kids and wouldn't change the fact that she had them, but she also said that if they'd never turned up, she'd have a lot more freedom. She'd have travelled more and had a life more like mine. She was envious, and she let that get in the way of our friendship, and, that was that, really. Because it's not like you can send them back to where they came from, is it? It's a bigger decision than a lot of people often appreciate whether or not to have children. Therefore, in my most humble opinion, those who choose not to go down that path deserve as much respect for that decision as anyone who decides they do want to. Now I'm in my 60s, I've obviously sailed past the point where people ask me when I'm going to start a family. Now most don't ask me much at all, although it doesn't stop them from appearing quite shocked or even downright scandalised when I say I didn't have them. Now I'm often asked if I have grandkids. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I tend to meet it with a simple no. But here's the thing, in saying that no, I still feel I have to deliver it with a smile at the same time as I'm trying to make it a decisive syllable that doesn't encourage further dialogue. I still feel I have to try and minimise the impact of my choices on other people's sense of what's right and proper, whose lives aren't even affected, one way or the other, by what I've chosen to do. How crazy is that? How stupid is that? I need to stop feeling like I need to walk on eggshells over that, don't I? I know a bunch of voluntarily childless women, and they've all experienced negative reactions in one form or another. Some have had to deal with very little backlash, while others have had to suffer no end of censure or downright refusal to accept it as a choice. And it's all too often family that treat them like they're a huge disappointment. One of my friends no longer speaks to her mother after informing her that she wasn't going to procreate, and her mother turned around and condemned her with very strong language indeed for torturing her, unquote, by depriving her of the chance to be a grandmother. My friend was just crushed. She was confused and bewildered, and she was angry too. I remember her telling me how upset she was that her mother thought it was her right to be a grandparent, when it is in fact a privilege that's bestowed on the fortunate because of someone else making a choice that feels right for their life. That's a terrible thing to do to anyone. Guilt trip them horribly for choosing to live the life they want, rather than the life their parents want or expect them to have. 3 decades on from that conversation my friend had with her mum, they still don't speak, any more than superficially. It's not for want of trying. My friend loves her mum, but she wouldn't allow her to railroad her into a very, very big life choice that was totally against what she wanted. Her mother never forgave her. It's outrageous, right? Well, I think it is. I think it's a terrible tragedy of short-sightedness and lack of respect for the choices of your own child, someone you're supposed to love and accept unconditionally, no matter what they choose to give you or not in this life. It's hard for any woman to feel she's less loved by someone who doesn't approve of her choice to live the life she has every right to choose. It's a horrible thing, isn't it, to feel like you've disappointed someone who means the world to you. My friend has had to let herself off the hook, and she's done it, but of course it's not without its sacrifice, and it's not without having done a lot of emotional spade work to finally get to the place where she's able to live with the fact that her relationship with her mum is never going to be what she wanted it to be. I've been there, kind of. I still remember my father's look of complete confusion and bafflement when I told him I had no desire to perpetuate the gene pool. He didn't want to acknowledge the fact that he was a big part of the reason. The way I was brought up formed one of the fundamental cornerstones of my decision to remain childless, and I won't say anything more than that about it. But I guess there are probably a fair few of you who feel that you didn't have the best role models either, and that shaped your view on life and the choices you've made about a lot of things. As we age, one of the things we feel ourselves having to do more and more is make allowances for the ignorant. We make excuses for the nosy, the crass, the insensitive, and the opinionated. We make excuses for the people who don't respect our boundaries and the ones who ram their unwelcome, unasked for advice down our throats about how they think we should live. We tell ourselves whatever excuse we feel is appropriate, don't we, in order to stop ourselves from getting too bent out of shape about how they judge us. Life's too short, right? It doesn't make it okay for people to trample all over our choices in life, but telling ourselves whatever we have to, well, I guess it helps us live with the fact that people have judged us, sometimes in ways we don't deserve, for the choices we've had as much right as they've had to make. My latest novel, due out in the next couple of weeks, is called The Choice Between Safe and Brave. It's book 6 in the Teapot Cottage series, and it deals with people making choices in life that feel right for them. One of the characters is a man who's struggling to find a new direction in his life after losing the love of it. Another is an older woman who's offered the chance to have the kind of life she once thought she'd never have or ever deserve. And another is a young woman who's discovering what she wants in life. The career choice she makes is awesome and terrifying, and it categorically doesn't involve having children. She doesn't want them, and she's very clear about that, but she gets a lot of backlash from directions that surprise her. She is strong enough to withstand the pressure, but she does it at quite a cost. As usual in this series, the older matriarchs advise, support and guide her to stay on her unique path and encourage her to celebrate her choices rather than be ashamed of them or give in to the need to justify them to anyone. Some of those matriarchs themselves are childless, and their wisdom is born of understanding. The book explores a lot of themes. In fact, it's the biggest yet of the novels which all address big issues in life, particularly those that are faced by ageing women. This young woman's mother offers a perspective that surprises her, and it forms the cornerstone of the decisions she then goes on to make about her future. Throughout history, women have borne the brunt of patriarchal rule. It still exists whether we like it or not, and even the most radical of women teachers who teach feminism and encourage women's rights do that within the patriarchal construct in which they were taught to teach. So the unconscious biases still exist that push women in certain directions where men, and often a lot of women too, still believe they should go. It happens almost unconsciously. Nowadays, it's more accepted that women can choose to be childless, but it's not fully accepted in most social theatre. You don't change a centuries-old ethos overnight, especially an unconscious one, because in order to do that, it has to be properly brought out into the open, examined, accepted as an issue to be challenged, and reworked to fit within the framework of modern life. And there will always be big resistance to that from men and from more traditionally oriented women. So maybe we will always have to justify our decisions to someone over bucking traditional trends. Maybe the fact that we choose to be childless, we choose to be different, will always bring frustration through lack of acceptance or understanding on a wider level. But the truth is, not everyone wants to be a parent, do they? And that should be okay, shouldn't it? It really is none of anyone else's business, and not everyone who is a parent should be a parent, should they? When someone asks us, why did you not want children? We usually don't have the energy to look them in the eye and say back, well, tell me all the reasons why you did want to have them. But maybe we need to do more of that. Maybe we need to find that energy. Maybe we need to educate the ignorant who push our boundaries on very personal issues that have more behind them than people think. We don't have to explain anything at all, but maybe turning the tables and putting the spotlight back on them might make them realise that they actually don't have the right to ask such intrusive personal questions. Children are a powerful form of social currency. As a childless woman, I know what it's like to be on the outside of conversations about raising children. I know how isolating it can be when all of your friends are sitting around at coffee mornings comparing notes about poo colour or when to start solids or which schools are better than others. I know what it's like to have friends disappear because they see us as having nothing in common anymore. I've been through all that. What I did was seek out other women who felt the same way I did about being child-free, and I finally felt accepted into a social theatre where there was no condemnation or negative judgment. And what a relief it was to get there. I could have a conversation without it swinging around to how offensive some people found my choices. Yes, we did. We sat around and we had coffee mornings and we did gnash our teeth a bit about the downsides. And I remember very clearly one conversation where a friend remarked that she had no children to look after her in her old age. And another friend piped up, well, even if you did, there's no guarantee they would. And that's as much the truth as anything else is, right? But it makes me realise that the reasons for having children are important too. Thank heavens more women do than don't want to have a baby or two. The world would be a pretty sad place, not to mention probably entirely doomed if it were full of women like me. But just because women like me don't feel the urge or the need to procreate, it doesn't make us less as women than the women who do. If you're happy being child-free, I think that's wonderful. I think it is something to celebrate. Your reasons are quite possibly as complex as mine, and even if they're not, they're good enough. Even if they don't go beyond selfishness, as a rock most of us have had thrown at us at one time or another, your reasons are your own, and no amount of social pressure should make you feel embarrassed about them. A woman's right to choose is exactly that. And as women, we can do a lot more than judge by our own standards. If you're a woman with kids and grandkids, I'm sure you respect the choices of women who want to be powerhouses in a different way. They want to contribute to society in a different way. We must let them, free of judgment or pressure, to have lives and responsibilities they're unwilling or incapable of taking. God, judgment from men is bad enough, and there's plenty of that. As women, we can be of real support to other women who make different choices if we give them enough credit for knowing what's right for themselves. And if you're getting judgment for being childless, the next person who throws that rock at you, I'll throw one back and say, it's none of your beeping business. Right? Yeah. The choice between safe and brave is available soon on Amazon and other good literary platforms. You can subscribe to this channel and you'll get the email of when it's available to buy. This one is a heartwarming novel in every sense of the word, and the characters are some of the ones I'm the most proud of having created. They have to be brave in different ways in order to achieve the life they want, and childless women have been brave in making that choice. If it is a choice, it's a brave one, and don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. And I'll talk to you soon.